Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning to you there in Texas. You're in Texas, correct?
I am indeed.
Okay, good morning to you in Texas there, William. I'm joined today on the HR Congress podcast by William Tincup, the president of recruitingdaily.com. So I was planning to go into a little bit more detail, as I would usually do for most speakers, but I think it would be better to hear from William yourself a little bit more about your background and, of course, introduction to the podcast. But first of all, you're going to be speaking at the HR Congress this year in Nice, delivering a keynote presentation entitled Anticipating the Future, Talent in the Experience Economy. And you'll also be presenting a keynote session at the Onboarding Summit, which is a slightly smaller event taking place within the HR Congress, entitled From Candidate Experience to Employee Experience. So thank you, William. Thank you for joining me today. It's a real pleasure to have you with me.
Well, I appreciate the intro and, the background, very interesting background from the perspective of I didn't come up through HR. Like a lot of people that have fallen into recruiting or HR, some of them have degrees. They go to university and they study and they do that bit. And they start at the bottom and then they kind of move their way through. I'm one of those people that didn't do that. I came up through marketing. And at one point I owned an ad agency, and our clientele was the vendors that sold into HR. So what made us really unique is we got to know HR and recruiting and kind of like what do they like? What are some of their traits? What kind of marketing works for them? What doesn't work for them? What will they take action on? What will they read? What will they not participate in? Those types of things. And the more I did that, and I was doing a lot of the HR recruiting related tasks for the agency, I found myself at kind of a crossroads where I fell in love with HR. And it's not to say that I fell out of love with marketing. It's just I fell in love with, HR all over the world, regardless of where you live and or how you do HR. Some of the darkest parts of an organization. The sexual misconduct, pay inequities, performance reviews, all this stuff about the firm. Yet when you talk to HR people, by and large, they're still hopeful. They're not cynical or jaded or become pessimistic, and they still have hope. And I love people that can see the darkness and still have hope. So I found myself at an interesting crossroads in 2010 where I sold my business to my partner, and I went out and I started to pursue more HR-related tasks, one of which, it was the first thing I studied, was user adoption. Starting in 2010, I started to look at, okay, you've bought the software, great. How do you get people to fall in love with it? And so, starting there, then I started to study other things, and kind of led me to this position where I am right now. But again, didn't come up through. Hold all the certifications in the U.S. So I tested and I hold all those certifications that you're supposed to, but just fell in love with HR.
Actually, I think it's quite common for a lot of people these days to not actually be classically coming from an HR background. I've met numerous people over the time working with the HR Congress and related events who are coming from sociology or political science or something completely different, biology or whatnot. So I think it's actually quite common. And I think that's one of the very unique things about HR is that you can sort of find your way into it as a profession, as an area of interest. So what are the kind of things that are grinding your gears, so to speak, at the moment about perhaps talent acquisition, but also the HR world more generally?
I think, without making too much of generational kind of what I call generational warfare, us versus them. What I would say is we were blindsided in large part by the millennial generation because we thought that they would behave like Gen X. By and large, maybe a little twist here, a little twist there, and they didn't. They were completely different. And again, good things came out of that. Good things are about that. But we, again, in HR and in recruiting, we just kind of kept trying some of the old things that worked, and for Gen X, and they didn't work for millennials, and so we blame millennials rather than blaming ourselves or looking at it through a different lens and saying, well, maybe there's things that are at play here that we haven't studied or we haven't looked at. And so what I love about that is it kind of shook us to our core that, hey, listen, we can keep complaining about millennials, or we can kind of really start to understand them and understand what drives them, what motivates them, what kind of makes them move, what makes them tick, what's going to make them great managers, what's going to make them great leaders, those types of things. And so with the generation now that's after that, Gen Z, roughly age 23 to age 8, we're at the very beginning stages of recruiting those folks, college recruiting, entry-level positions, etc. Are we going to make some of the same mistakes? That's one of the questions that I have floating around in my brain is, are we going to make similar mistakes that we made with millennials? Or are we going to treat Gen Z like we treated millennials and assume that they behave the same way as millennials? And so I've been studying and doing a lot of work just to understand, instead of getting blindsided and thinking and making any assumptions, let's dig in and really kind of find out what makes them tick and get to know them, and then kind of reverse out, okay, here's some of the best practices that we know worked with boomers, with Gen X, with millennials, and we'll probably work with Gen Z, and let's see what we have to change. In recruiting, in onboarding, in performance, in everything in HR. What do we need to change to fit them?
I think that's a very interesting point. And my initial reaction, I always tend to shy away from putting labels on generations.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I think that's, of course, an assumption in itself because, yeah, you're very much correct. It's really about looking to see in more depth what is actually happening in the longer term as these generational differences do play out in a wider sense. But my initial reaction is always to go, oh, well, no, let's not generalize by age, but it's maybe a little more complicated than that these days. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's and they don't, again, making assumptions versus kind of treating it as a blank slate. I think we're probably better served treating it like a blank slate and going, oh, okay, well, they kind of behave similar in this way, dissimilar in this way, and then, okay, well, what impact does that have on us? And I'll give you a simple example. Attention span is different. It's a different between, on average, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. And I'll just kind of fast forward to Gen Z. Gen Z, on average, 23 to 8, again, the years that make up that generation, they have about an 8-second attention span. And there's reasons for that. They're digital natives that grew up on touch computing and voice computing. They've had iPhones in their hands since they were 2. And they've been, inundated both with gaming and with other types of computing where the things move really fast for them. They're accustomed to, well, if this, I downloaded a game, I played it twice, didn't like it, X'd out of it, deleted it. And okay, so let's just say, let's even say that we made an error and it's double that, 16-second attention span. All right, that's fine. I'm willing to say that, you make mistakes in research. Okay. Well, as a Gen X person, I'm 51. I would fight through a 2,300 word job description, like on Career Builder or on a job site, career site. I would fight through a strict narrative, no pictures, no videos, no interactivity, 2,300 words. I would read every one of them. And I'd basically, at the end of that, say, do I see myself in this role? Do I fit? Do I meet the criteria, etc.? But I have more than a 16-second attention span. So what do you do with someone that has 8-second, 12-second, 16-second attention span? Well, if you serve up a 2,300 word job description, they're not going to read it. So that's just is. So now what do you do? How do you change? How do you adapt into that process where, okay, we either can adapt or we're going to think that they're going to adapt around us. And if you go around to career sites, on companies' pages, their career pages, and you look right now, what you'll find is a lot of text. You go, it doesn't matter the company, and I don't want to pick on anybody, but you just go and pull up your favorite company, go to their career page, and you're going to see a lot of text. And that's going to change. One way or another. Either we change it because we can't get recruits the talent, or we realize this isn't getting the talent to apply to the job. So we need to adapt. There's this kind of funny story about a guy that rents a billboard in Silicon Valley in San Francisco, and it just says software engineer, $285,000. These are the language you'll use. Here's the link to learn more about the position. Like, that's all you need to know. You need to know what it is, how much it's paying, some of the things you'll do, and if you want to learn more, click the link. And that works, and will work more than a 2,300 word job description. So, like, when we talk about it, it's like, well, we can either change and adapt to them to meet them where they are, or we can kind of do what we do and hope that they adapt to us.
Yeah, there's a very big difference. And it's funny because my immediate reaction, if I was, let's say I'm a recruiter, which I'm not very clearly, and someone didn't apply to the job because the job description was 1,500 words or whatnot, I'd be like, oh, well, they obviously can't hack it. They're not going to join us. So what? Okay. But obviously, if we're adapting and evolving the user experience to reflect, or the candidate experience perhaps, to reflect the potential talent pool that's out there, which isn't going to put up with mountains of text, then perhaps we'd see different results. And of course, the immediate reaction to say, well, they're not going to read it, so we'll find someone who does read it, et cetera, et cetera. But when all of those people don't apply either, there's something else going on here. It's quite funny because at the moment we're having a relatively long form podcast, which requires attention, to talk about the fact that perhaps attention spans are going to be a critical factor in attracting people to work or to do anything else for that matter.
That's right. Well, what's funny is I think podcast, there's such a revolution around podcasts because people can listen to it, download it through iTunes and listen to it when they're doing other things. So I podcast and kind of continued education, continued learning, self-help, entertainment, education, inspiration, all those types of things has become kind of a form of music. It has become an audio file. Like, when you're in the mood, you can click on a playlist that you love that's about a generation of music that you love. When you're looking for self-help related content, you've already subscribed to 10 different podcasts that kind of fit that mold. and you can click on those and then burn through them. And then burn through them, what's great is you can do it during your commute. You can do it, when you're exercising. You can do it when you're working, and so reading, again, attention span aside for just a second, reading, it requires a device and you looking at the device and consuming it by you looking at the device and scrolling, paging up, paging down, etc. Audio content doesn't necessarily require those things. There's an output, could be from your car or from your phone or from whatever, and in your ears. And you can actually be doing something. And I had a podcast for about 5 years. And I remember going to conferences and people coming up to me afterwards, after I spoke or whatever, and people would, hey, I was mowing the grass the other day and I was listening to your podcast. And it always kind of made me think like, wow, they don't consume podcasts, and I think in the ways that we think that they do. Like it isn't just a work product. It's they consume it when they want to consume it, how they want to consume it. And podcasts, there's less barriers. You can, and there's even less barriers than video. Because video, again, you've got to have your eyeballs looking at the thing. You can still listen to the audio, but it almost requires listening to the audio and looking at the device. So there's less barriers. And I think that's why there's such an uptick in great podcasts, is because people have kind of clued into, hey, listen, they can listen to these things. On the way to sleep, they can listen to these things and go, you know what, I'm gonna download a couple of podcasts, and as I kind of zone out for sleep, I'm gonna listen to a couple of these, and I'll lull myself to bed.
Yeah, basically, I consume all my podcasts while I'm cooking food at home, or occasionally if I'm cleaning or something silly like that, I can just put the Joe Rogan Experience on or something, and I'm away for the next 2 hours, and it's so easy.
Yeah,
like the setup I have for the HR Congress podcast is a laptop, a microphone, and that's pretty much it. A connection to the internet, and you're done. It's a very simple thing. Obviously, in the future, I'd love to have a studio set up or something, but that's
What's interesting just about that real quick is YouTube taught us that you don't have to have studio quality to get viewership. If you have something compelling, if you have something interesting, you can get viewership. So it's kind of your interest over, and again, something compelling over the production value. Like it doesn't have to be Hollywood. This is, again, it doesn't, with YouTube, it doesn't have to be high quality, Hollywood level quality to get people to fall in love with the video. Same is true in audio. They want to be able to hear you. So quality, there's a bottom that you can't go below. Like it can't be itchy and scratchy, and we make it difficult for people to, to listen or to hear. Okay, but beyond that, the upside, having, again, a studio to where it protects your quality. Again, that's great, but as long as it's not itchy and scratchy, I think people will listen to it, and I think that's why kids podcasts are extremely popular with other kids, because they're watching other kids play video games, and it's okay if the mic cut out, hold on, let me try a different volume setting, like that stuff. It's actually kind of a part of the experience. Whereas we have a different threshold with writing, and we have a different threshold with video.
I wanted to move on to a question about the HCM Tech sector, because this is something I don't really know a lot about. So how do you cut through all of that noise and all of the possible solutions out there and possible vendors to find something that would hypothetically fit your organization the best, how do you approach that whole situation?
So a couple of things is, what's the problem to be solved? So let's say that, we know we have an onboarding problem. People have told us there's an onboarding problem. We recognize we're losing people right after onboarding. Okay, it's just painfully obvious that we have an onboarding problem. Okay, so the first thing what we would do is then look at the process. Look at what vendors that we're using there to solve that problem currently. And then look at the process. Like, okay, what's in this process that's broken? Let's get the process right. Let's get, our team to really, really take some time out and look at, okay, if I were to start this job, I sign the offer letter, I start on Monday, what happens? What do we want people to feel? And that's actually where we get into some of the feelings part of this. Is we get into some of the emotions. Is what do we want to unlock? What's the experience that we want to unlock for somebody? So what is that? What do you want to smell? What do you want to see? What do you want to hear? What do you want to feel? All of those types of things. So we get our people involved there, and then we go look for technology that then helps us solve the problem and can sit on a new process, a new onboarding process. It gels with what the people believe is the experience that we want to create. It's malleable enough that it can bend and fit the experience that we want to create for people. And then we take people through the paces of buying technology, because there's not just one onboarding vendor, there's 180. And so it's like, okay, well, which ones do we think would fit the best? And then we shortlist that, and we start doing demos, and there's all kinds of different things on the buying side. But the idea is you start with a problem. Where is it broken? Where do we need to first fix? Where is it broken, and agree on it. Let's not go and say something's broken that's not. Let's not create pet projects. If it's really broken, we should all be able to point to it and go, yeah, that's broken. How we source talent, how we do performance reviews, how we do compensation analysis or comp packages, how we communicate benefits. Like there's so many things in HR that we look at it and there's a brokenness to it or not. And when we find the thing that we all can agree on and say, yeah, that's broken, that's great. Because then we know, okay, well then if we weren't doing it this way, how would we do it? So let's put on our imaginary hat and let's think, about this experience that we want to create. And the first thing you do is disconnect from the way you do it. Let's just act like we weren't doing it that way. How would we go about these things? How would we go about doing this, right now? If we weren't doing it this way, how would we do it? And that opens people up to go, okay, here's what I would do. And that then starts the solution process. But you first find the real problem, agree on the problem, and then start looking around to then go, okay, we found the problem. We're starting to re-engineer kind of what's the process underneath that problem that can fix it, and then let's go look for technology that will sit on top of it.
Employer brand is one thing I wanted to touch on a little bit more as well, because it's becoming much better understood and more widely talked about in the HR world at the moment. What are some of the cornerstones of a great employer brand, and especially when it comes to recruiting and or the candidate experience?
So EB is what I love about employer branding, different than recruitment marketing. Employer branding is it's where you tell the truth. And that's the hardest thing for us. This is it's not a marketing gimmick. It's not a an area in which we would deceive or lie, which, no one starts out thinking that they're going to go and deceive or lie. But this is the area where we start with the idea of, like, the more transparent we are, the better this is for them and for us. Because employer brands should both get people excited and engage people, and it should also repel people. Like, yeah, that's not a good fit for me. So let me give you an example of that. Rackspace. It's a well-known company here in the States that does hosting technology. Let's just keep it simple. Well, they kind of market themselves and say, hey, listen, we work 12-hour days. We have a skate park inside the office. We work really, really hard. We don't have a lot of lights on because we like to work in the dark. And we drink a lot of Mountain Dew. We're highly caffeinated. Now, and there's a lot of other things that they go into, but that's kind of like the nutshell is, if you're not that person, then you're not going to apply. If you're that person, then you're going to apply, right? And so that's why it should both activate someone and they should see themselves in it and go, oh my God, this is the company I've been waiting for. And it should excite people. And at the same time, it should also, for the people that it doesn't fit for, get them just the same clarity that the person that's excited about the job is the people that are not excited about the job. Like, oh, I'll never work there. I'll never work in that environment. That's not something that's interesting to me. So whereas before, what we would do is we would tell a glorious story, probably a lot of future tense, and probably a lot of aspirational about who we are. So instead of talking about who we are now, we would really talk about who we want to become, right? And that's the brand that we would put in front of people, is we'd put the brand of who we would like to become in front of people, rather than who we really are. What I advise people is, stop doing that. Put who you are right now, and didn't even tell people aspirationally, we would like to be there, but we're not there right now. And if you join us on Tuesday, on Wednesday, this is the firm that you're going to interact with. Because what we don't want is, we don't want the brand drop off. Where we sold them a bag of goods that said, we're an 8-to-5 culture. It's a dressed down culture. Wear your jeans. Wear your sweater vest, and whatever. Be relaxed. We do a lot of stuff together, so there's a lot of parties. There's a lot of extracurricular activities with the firm, and then all of a sudden they get in on Wednesday. And they find out you're not an 8-to-5 culture, you're a 7-to-10 culture. And there's a lot of drinking at work. You don't do activities outside of work as much as drink at work. Like you find out, and everyone's wearing suits. Okay, and so that dress down, wear jeans, maybe once a year. So essentially what we've done is we've lied to that talent to get them in. And, the best advice that you can give somebody that does employer branding is, at all turns, tell the truth, even when it isn't a popular thing for you. You know what I mean? Even when it kind of sheds a not as popular light, on you. Like, this is what people got wrong about Amazon's culture. Now months, maybe even almost a year ago, the New York Times wrote an article about how Amazon's culture was bad. And there isn't a bad culture per se. It was, this is a culture that, would be bad for you. you wouldn't thrive in this culture. Well, that's fine. But there's a ton of people that thrive in the Amazon culture, because the Amazon culture is a lot like investment banking on Wall Street. So you're A game, you bring it all the time. We're workaholics, meritocracy, best idea wins, and oh, by the way, we don't really care about work-life balance. That's cool that you do, but we don't. We want people to work and care about working, not care about puppy setting and like all the other things that make up life. If you care about that, that's great. Go work somewhere else. And so what they got wrong is that somehow that's wrong. I don't believe that. In fact, I thought that they did the best job of telling an honest and authentic story about who they are. And so why would we punish them for that? We should actually be thanking them for telling the truth, rather than punishing them for telling the truth about who they are and how they work.
Yeah, exactly. In the long term, I guess the market will decide if their strategy was correct. And that's, well, from evidence at the moment, I guess with Amazon, yes, in short. But yeah, exactly. Just be more truthful. And that's something I think I can get behind, and I think a lot of people can get behind, because I think we can all think of examples, and I'm not going to name organizations, maybe another time, where you can kind of see that they're still lying to candidates or potential candidates about the culture within the organization. And there's no need. There's not really a need nowadays.
That's right.
Most of that information is out there anyway. The switched on candidates will find out very quickly if they've been misled. So yeah, just be truthful.
Well, really quickly, we live in an era of transparency. So even if it's not within your morals or ethics or any of that other stuff, even if it's not there, it's in your best. It's in your best interest to tell the truth now, because they're going to find out anyhow.
Yep. Exactly.
So, okay.
So, what are some of the unfolding impacts that you're seeing of the new AI technologies that are rolling out on recruitment? Obviously, AI is one of those things that everyone talks about, and far from being an expert myself, I have some ideas on it and probably a bit pessimistic. But what do you see as some of the impacts occurring at the moment?
Well, I think the first of all, we don't know the limits. We don't know. We're at the beginning, right? And we don't know where this is really going to take us. It could take us into really good places. It could also take us into some places we're not ready for. What I love about AI, machine learning, differently, is that it is helping us with some of the tactical things that we weren't doing or weren't doing well. So things like feedback, or things like letting people know where they are in the process. A bot can do that. You know what I mean? That's what's great about it, is like a complaint that we would have had 4 or 5 years ago is that I have no idea where I'm at in the process. And, like on consumer tech, your pizza place, or your car service lets you know where they are in relation to you dropping stuff off to you or picking you up. Why don't we know where we are when it relates to a job? Like, it's kind of silly that we don't know, okay, we reviewed a resume. It's now on to the assessment phase. We're sending you an assessment. Expect a link within the next 48 hours, da, 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 da. Like, we should expect that. Well, AI, machine learning, and bots, all of which are helping us with things like that, like scheduling. Like, there's, an AI app that basically, let's say we want to schedule 5 people for this interview internally to meet with the one person externally. Well, before, what we would do is we would have literally a person, a coordinator, a scheduling coordinator, go through everyone's calendar and find the right time, talk to the candidate, and then box that in. There's technologies now that can literally do that for you. They can go through your calendar, all the other people they want, the candidates, and find the right time, set up the calendar invite, send it to everybody, and set up the conference bridge, and it's done. Sally or Jim didn't have to do that. So it allows Sally or Jim to go and do other things that are more important, which is really the goal of all these advancements in technology, is to get recruiters to a place that they're not doing tactical work. Tactical work is being done in a more efficient way so that it frees them up to do the strategic work that needs to be done in recruiting.
What would be some of the onboarding practices, generally speaking, that you would be the most forceful in suggesting to organizations that they should adopt? What would be your essentials for onboarding?
So onboarding is a continuation of the recruiting process. So onboarding is that beginning phase that I believe lasts for about a year. It should last for about a year, where we're both deciding, both company and candidate and now employee, are making the decision or making the determination, did they make the right decision? Did I join the right firm? Am I in the right job? Am I doing the right things? Is this the place for me? And so that isn't a binder. That isn't a one-day session. That isn't a week. That is a constant, a relentless pursuit on both sides to answer that question. Did I make the right decision? So we romance people in the recruiting phase, and we need to continue to romance them and to make sure that they have a really good setup, so that we can make a better, based our best determination on, are they a great fit? Is this the right person for this job? And so that's the first thing, is extending that, a lot of people talk about engagement, employee engagement. Well, employee engagement, that literally starts at offer letter. So you've made the offer letter, they've said yes. The ticking sound that you hear in the background, that's your onboarding clock. That's your engagement clock. That's just started. So we need to start the engagement, employee engagement, as soon as they sign the offer letter, as soon as they are an employee. Before that, there's a recruitment experience that we need to create. That's a little bit different, but and there's recruitment engagement that's a little bit different. But employee engagement starts at the offer letter. So we need to be diligent and relentless about how we continue to make sure and ask and answer and engage and just find out, okay, are they still digging us? Are we still digging them? And the last thing I'd say, and it's something that would be easy for us to do, relatively easy for us to do, to learn more about our candidates, is older millennials, younger millennials, older Gen Z, they want to get better. They want to be better at work. And that's kind of the old-fashioned learning and development, training and development, leadership programs, etc. Well, there's a kind of an older philosophy of training that, you have compliance training, which is, I have to train you on this so that we're legally compliant. And then there's the other side of training of, I want you to be better. You want to be better in Excel. You want to be better in this, Boolean search. Okay, I'm going to invest money and you getting better at these things. What I think is really fascinating is, personally, what else would they like to learn? So in the sourcing process, in the recruiting process, hiring process, we can ask the questions. Hey, what would you like to learn? Or what are some of your hobbies? Like, what are you into? Hang gliding, collecting coins? You like going to music concerts, cigar rolling, scotch tasting? Like, what do you like? Yeah, it has nothing to do with work. And then and also mix in some of the work things. Like you're a developer. Great. What languages would you like to learn? And then in onboarding, we validate those things. So when we were recruiting you, you said that, balloon racing or drone racing is something that you're really into. And we've got some content in our LMS that's all about drone racing. So we want to turn you on to that and let you see that and engage with that content, because we know that that's an interest of yours. Like, it's the whole you shows up to work, and we want to engage the whole you at work, even if it's about things that aren't about work. So we want to engage them today, more so even than yesterday, in both the professional compliance check, professional, learning and development that they want to learn, we need them to learn, etc., but also that personal. And again, this is a great thing to do in onboarding, is we validate the learning path. And we validate, like, okay, here's what you said. Let's make sure that we heard you correctly. Is this still true? Are these still the things that you'd like to learn? Okay, great. We're going to set you up, and we're going to do it through the LMS, and we're going to, lock that in to where, you start off and you can start learning about, the things that you care about, the things that we care about, we need you to learn, and the things that we're legally bound for you to learn, right? So onboarding becomes this gateway to learning and development, which is another interesting way of saying employee engagement.
It's all very much connected, and it really
Yes, sir.
comes down to validation, authenticity. What is it that you want to get better at? What are your skills? What do we see for you in the future? How can we work together on building you into something that's going to contribute in the longer term to the success of the business? And it's one of those things where I think, at least now, it's almost a prerequisite to start thinking about onboarding, moving into learning and development as this holistic developmental process where you can be your authentic self. So you'll be presenting 2 keynote sessions with us this year, one at the HR Congress and one at the Onboarding Summit within the HR Congress.
Right.
What can attendees expect from those presentations?
Well, with the first one, it's the language has changed. And, people again, we'll use ages as a way of delineating this just to show people. But like the language of jobs and careers and all of the labor terms that are historically been our terms are not necessarily the way that they talk. And so I think we have to do is we have to pick up a new vernacular, a new way to talk about gigs, experiences. What do you like? Because they're going to ask what's next. That's an internal mobility question for us, a historical question. But they're going to ask in the recruiting process, what's next? So we have to have an answer of what's next, because people under the age of, let's say, 40, think of jobs not as jobs, but as gigs. Like, yeah, I'm doing this gig. But, I got another gig. I got a side gig. I got this other gig. Me and my brother are doing this gig. I really want to do this gig over here at this other company. They talk in different ways. What we have to do is get and understand the way they talk, and then be able to translate that internally as to how we talk back. How do we respond to them? So the language of labor has changed. And again, do we change with it, or do we expect them to come in and kind of bend to the way that we use language? So that's the first session. The first session is about how the world, again, the ground beneath us is shifting. How is it shifted? And how do we adapt? We'll start with the basic question: do we adapt, or do we, want them to come to where we are? Okay, if we choose the former, not the latter, then we will say, okay, fantastic. How do we speak differently? How do we mimic them in the way that they talk about the language of labor, and how do we talk about it? And how do we mimic that? How do we make our job description smaller, yet still cover the job? How do we create intrigue? Like when you're recruiting a 23-year-old, you're talking in a series of gigs. Listen, this is what we want you to do. Your first gig with us is going to be about 9 months, 12 months, based on success. You're going to do a great job. When you get done with that job, we got another gig. Okay, so we've got a series of gigs internally to the company that we want you to work on. To a 23-year-old, I'm talking that person's language. To a 50-year-old, I'm not, because I'd be talking about career and career paths and internal mobility and all of this other language, different language, labor language. So the first session's about that. The second session is about experiences and how do we create micro experiences. So there's essentially the relationship with candidates, there's a relationship with employees, and a relationship with alumni. And how are we more thoughtful in what we produce as the experience that we want that group of people to have? So in this case, we're talking about employees, for the transition from candidates to employees, onboarding. What experience do we want to create so that they fall in love with the experience? They fall in love with the company because the experience was built around them, highly personalized around their needs.
I want to finish off with the most important question of all.
Sure.
And this question is one that I've obviously done a little bit of research, and I know that you enjoy beer. So do I. So which brewery would you run to assist if they called for help? What would be the first choice?
First on the list would be Chimay. It's a Belgian beer. If they called, I'd leave tomorrow. I'd be there. I'd be on a plane. I'd figure it out with my wife and kids and how to get them over, but I'd be on a plane tomorrow.
For me, it's brewery Huiga, the ones who produce Delirium, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
Totally, but that would be for me. I fell in love with that beer a while ago. And
I could see that. Again, I'd work out all the other things that need to be worked out, like pay and benefits and all that other stuff. Like we could figure all that stuff out.
We see it's a shame that we're not having the event again in Brussels, because that's where the event was last year. So of course, in the center of the Belgian beer world.
It's good anywhere you have it. So, but yeah, that's where I would leave, be on a flight, and we'd work out all the details in the interim and after. But yeah, if they called, I'd be there tomorrow.
I'm sure they have an interesting onboarding process as well. So
there's no doubt.
Okay, well, thank you very much, William, for joining me today. It was a real pleasure to speak with you.
Absolutely.
I'll look forward to meeting you, obviously, on site in Nice and having some more conversations.
Well, and Ben, if you want to do this again, get a little bit even closer to the event, different topics, love to help out.
Sure, let's plan for something, okay?
All right, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Have a great, rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, and enjoy your travel forward. Hopefully it's not too...
All right. Yeah.
Too tough.
Super easy. Thank you, my friend.
No worries. Thank you.